My wife Evelyn's phone glowed ominously on the table. The banner read, "Divorce him. He doesn't know about us." I booked Friday. The sender was M. Evelyn flipped the screen face down and asked if I wanted more carrots, while I felt the gravy in my spoon turn to lead. Before we continue, please subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. I always assumed endings made themselves obvious. I expected some grandiose curtain drop, an ambulance, a fired pistol, at the very least an audible sigh. In reality, the world rarely bothers. Most endings come as an afterthought, a memo buried in the spam folder, a clouded memory whose importance you only grasp in retrospect. Mine arrived on a Tuesday, not with thunder, but as quietly as steam off the roast. 6:07 p.m. I remember the time not because I'm sentimental, but because I had just set the oven timer and caught the flicker of my wife's phone in the corner of my eye. The kitchen was stifling that day, windows closed to keep the February air out. I had just finished slicing carrots. Evelyn liked them blanched and coin-shaped, never sticks, and was lining them around the roast when her phone, left on the dining table beside her folded napkin, lit up with a banner. She didn't notice. She was fussing with the salt grinder, tapping it against her palm, which meant she was distracted. Her mother's old trick, that. When Evelyn's mind wandered, her hands always looked for something to do. I saw the message because I always saw things. 10 years as plant supervisor trains you to notice warning lights, leaks, the pattern of how things work and when they break. The banner blazed white against the oak table. I read it twice. Divorce him. He doesn't know about us. I booked Friday. The sender, M. I let the peeler drop. It clattered against the sink and snapped Evelyn from her reverie. She looked up, met my eyes. Then her gaze flitted to the phone. She didn't flinch, just reached over, pressed her thumb to the glass, and flipped it face down. The kitchen returned to its quiet rhythm, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the low simmer of gravy. "Want more carrots?" she asked, as if nothing had passed between us but an errant breeze. Her voice was so smooth, you might think she'd spent years in front of a microphone, not as the treasurer of the church ladies or the neighborhood HOA. I stared at the orange rounds nested around the roast, each coin perfectly uniform, the way she liked, and felt the gravy in my spoon congeal to lead. I should have said something, demanded an explanation, thrown the phone against the wall, or at the very least tossed the goddamn carrots in the trash. But I did nothing. I simply nodded, ladled a spoonful over my own portion, and watched as she arranged her plate, dainty and efficient, not a drop of sauce out of place. I had seen Evelyn organize closets through 3 pregnancies, 2 job losses, and her mother's 8-year spiral into dementia. I once watched her alphabetize our VHS tapes in the middle of a tornado warning. This, I realized, was just another storm she'd already prepared for. We ate in silence, the kind that draws out every scrape of the fork, every wet chew, every imperfection in the world's design. I tried to swallow, but the food caught in my throat. I could taste the salt, the acid, the years spent stewing in the same air. I thought about the message, its economy of words, the precision. Divorce him. He doesn't know about us. I booked Friday. This was not a drunken late-night confession, not a thread of digital flirtation. This was a statement of intent, as measured and deliberate as Evelyn's coin carrots. She cleared her plate first, wiped the rim with her thumb, and walked to the sink. She did not look back at me. As she washed up, she hummed an old hymn, her mother's favorite, a funeral dirge in a major key. I finished eating because that is what one does. You finish your plate, you take your medicine. You keep the machinery running even when the gears begin to slip. I was raised to believe that men do not break. at least not where anyone can see. After dinner, she excused herself, saying she had to call Sarah. She left her phone on the table this time, face up, screen dark, as if daring me to check it. The room felt like a mausoleum, every surface gleaming with the stillness of something already dead. I did not touch the phone. Instead, I cleaned up, stacking the dishes in careful order, rinsing each one so the detergent would not form a film. I wiped the table, wiped the counters, wiped my hands dry until the skin stung. I poured myself 1 ounce of bourbon, always one, never two, and sat down at the head of the table, where I could see the whole kitchen. I waited for Evelyn's return, not out of hope, but from the need to witness the final collapse with my own eyes. When she did return, she found me there, hands folded, glass untouched. She walked past without speaking, her footsteps so light, I wondered how someone could make such ruin and leave no trace. That night, I lay in bed beside her, not sleeping, not moving. I listened to the clock click away the seconds, the cadence of her breathing. The message repeated itself on the inside of my eyelids. Divorce him. He doesn't know about us. I booked Friday. I thought of all the things I had ignored, little glitches in our routine, stray receipts in the glove compartment, the scent of aftershave not my own. I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner. I blamed her for hiding it so well. Mostly, though, I blamed the world for letting things end so quietly, so irreversibly, without even the dignity of a proper alarm. In the morning, Evelyn made coffee as if nothing had changed. She asked if I wanted eggs, and I said yes, because what else is there to do when the machinery has already started, when the timer is already counting down? I watched her crack them one by one, never wasting a shell, always landing the yolk cleanly in the bowl. I dressed. I left for work. I returned home. I repeated the cycle, pretending not to notice the subtle rewiring of our lives. The way she started answering calls in the laundry room. The way her voice softened whenever she said the name M. I kept my hands busy with repairs, tightening hinges, oiling locks, sealing the weather stripping on the front door. Because if I stopped, even for a second, I would have to confront the fact that there is no fixing what has already been scheduled for demolition. Friday came. She packed a small suitcase, blue with a broken zipper. She said she would be back Sunday evening, and I believed her because I had to. She kissed me on the cheek, a gentle peck, the way you might test if a wound has healed. I did not flinch. I just watched her go. When the door closed, I sat down at the kitchen table and read the message again, this time aloud, as if hearing it in my own voice might change its meaning. Divorce him. He doesn't know about us. I booked Friday. Some endings, I realized, do not arrive. They simply wait for you to let go of the past, so they can step in and take their place. I finished the last carrot from the bowl, cold and tough as a penny. I poured another ounce of bourbon, this time 2, and raised a silent toast to whatever would be left of me when the dust finally settled. The world never left much for men like me. We did not get poetry or parades. We inherited the drafts, the leaks, the jobs nobody else wanted, the liminal places in the world where things broke and waited for someone with tools and time to put them right. I came up in a house like that. Father gone, mother working doubles at the grocery, older brother in jail by 19 and never out long enough to remember birthdays. I learned to fix what I could, hide what I couldn't, and keep my mouth shut about the rest. I met Evelyn in my 20s. She was smart and looked at the world like it owed her something better, a trait I found confusing but compelling. She moved through her days with an order I envied, a sense that life could be filed into folders and processed by month's end. We met on a Tuesday. Funny, I suppose, that most of my life's crucibles fell on that day. I was fixing a lamp at the rec center, She was filling out intake forms for her mother, who'd been diagnosed with what the doctors called early onset. She asked if I had a Phillips. I did. She asked if I'd stay for coffee. I did. The second time we saw each other, she showed me the kitchen at her mother's house. The faucet leaked, the tile grout had gone soft, and the fridge ran with a rattle that could shake loose fillings. I fixed all of it and left without asking for thanks. That's how it started. We built a home of these moments. Her lists, my hands, two people searching for a version of happiness that felt plausible. Sarah was born 5 years in, after 3 miscarriages and a procedure we paid for on a Discover card with a 17% interest rate. I watched the bills roll in, the numbers growing like black mold across our mailbox, and swore I would never let my daughter see how close we came to collapse. I took overtime. I re-roofed the house myself, 1 row at a time, so the neighbors wouldn't see the tarps and judge us. I patched the minivan with scrap parts, always hunting for the cheapest fix. Evelyn managed the books and wrote checks, but it was my job to make sure there was something in the account to begin with. I can't count how many nights I lay awake calculating how to stretch a paycheck, whether to skip the water bill or the power, which creditor might be slowest to. Notice when Sarah reached high school, braces and band trips hit us at the same time. I told her she could have one or the other. She said she'd figure it out. She came home with a job at the Dairy Queen, her uniform 3 sizes too big, her hands smelling of fryer grease. She worked every Saturday, never complained, and by her junior year, I started to believe we'd made it. We had family game nights, takeout pizza, the little rituals that pass for joy in households like ours. Then the economy tanked, and the plant cut our hours. Evelyn got a temp gig at the university, and for a while we lived on peanut butter and the hope that Sarah's scholarships would come through. They didn't. The student loan people were sharks. The interest rates climbed like scaffolding. I offered to co-sign for Sarah, told her it was the only way, even though the paperwork made me feel like I was signing away the air I'd breathe in retirement. I did it anyway. After college, Sarah bounced between jobs, marketing, then a startup that went under, then marketing again but for half the pay. The rent on her apartment was a mortgage in miniature, and when her hours got cut, she came home for a while. Evelyn took it hard. She wanted Sarah to succeed, to keep climbing. I just wanted her safe. We built her a room in the basement. I sold some of my tools so she could buy a laptop. There was a stretch of weeks when she didn't leave her bed, and I thought she'd break for good, but she didn't. She started freelancing, writing ad copy for candle companies, dog food, supplements that claimed to regrow hair. She found her way eventually, but the world never lets you forget where you came from. Every time I called her, I could hear the hum of anxiety on the line, the unspoken tally of how far we hadn't gotten. The hardest years, though, were the ones Evelyn spent as her mother's caretaker. By then, Sarah was living with her boyfriend, and the house had gone quiet. We gave up the back porch for a ramp and a hospital bed. I learned to install grab bars and adult diapers. Every morning, Evelyn fed her mother scrambled eggs, spoon by spoon, as if each bite could slow the progression. Most days, her mother didn't know who we were. Some days she called me doctor, which I never corrected. Evelyn's eyes went hollow during those months. She did what needed doing, but she disappeared in increments, as if her own mind was giving up one room at a time. I took to walking at night, when the air was sharp enough to keep me awake. I'd circle the block and count the porch lights, imagining the lives inside each house, what debts they owed, what secrets they kept. I never envied them. I only wanted to know if anyone else felt as tired as I did, if the world was quietly draining them too. We buried Evelyn's mother in March. The funeral was sparse. Her brother drove in from Iowa, but left before the service ended. I remember standing by the grave, the sod still frozen, and feeling nothing. No sorrow, no relief, just a vacancy that could have swallowed the whole sky. Evelyn clung to my arm, her grip so tight I thought she'd crack the bone. After the mourners left, she sat on the edge of the headstone, silent, her breath visible in the cold. We stayed until dusk, the only people in the cemetery. She never said a word about that day, not once, not in the years that followed. Some wounds don't close. They simply harden and become part of the body. I believed, for a long time, that love was measured in labor. The hours you put in, the things you repaired, the grudges you let rust. I believed that men owed their families the silence of sacrifice, that if you did your job well, nobody noticed how much it hurt. The good father is an invisible scaffold. The good husband is a roof that never leaks, a door that never jams. I wore these truths like a uniform until the seams began to split. After Evelyn left with her suitcase, I wandered the house at night. I found myself in rooms I didn't remember entering. I ran my fingers along the banister, counted the dings and notches I'd patched over the years, remembered the paint colors we'd argued about, the weekends spent rolling primer in the tight corners. I noticed how quiet the house had become. The furnace cycled on and off, the pipes groaned, but nothing else moved. I thought about all the times I'd gotten up in the middle of the night to fix something. Sarah's fever, the water heater, Evelyn's night terrors. Each act of repair, a little vow that I would keep them safe, that I would hold everything together until my body gave out. I never told Evelyn about the time I almost left. It was after her mother died, when Sarah had moved out again and the days felt like static. I drove for hours that Sunday, past the county line, past the strip malls and the shuttered church, out to the woods where the air was clean and nobody knew my name. I thought about how easy it would be to just not turn back, to find a motel, a job, a new existence made of small, manageable tasks. But I did turn back, because what else is there? The work always waits, the house always needs you. I came home, kissed Evelyn on the forehead, and never mentioned it again. Now, as I stood in the kitchen with her phone in my hand, I wondered if all my years of labor had meant anything at all, if the house I built was ever really ours, or just a clever illusion we both agreed to inhabit until one of us found a better deal. I wanted to blame her, or Em, or the world, but I knew the truth. Some structures are rotten from the start. You just learn to love the way they lean, the way they hold up under pressure, the way they threaten to fall. I pressed the home button on Evelyn's phone, stared at the blank screen. I set it gently on the counter, careful not to leave a smudge. For the first time in my life, I let the dishes pile up in the sink. I watched the gravy harden, the carrots dry out, the water spots multiply across the plates. I wanted to see how long it would take for the mess to matter, how long it would take for the house to notice that nobody was fixing anything anymore. Love was the labor you don't tally. At least, that's what I'd always believed. Now I knew better. The only thing the world counts is what you leave behind when you're finally done. The day Evelyn left for her scheduled tryst, I spent the afternoon cleaning the kitchen. Not the surface wipe I usually did, but a full-scale operation, scrubbing grout with a toothbrush, dismantling the burners, bleaching the trash can. I told myself I was making things easier for her, a peace offering for the weekend. In truth, I was stalling, waiting for the gravity of her absence to hit me in a way that I could process without dissolving. It didn't. Or rather, it did, but only in fragments like glass shattering in slow motion. I found myself staring at her phone on the counter, half expecting it to ring with some message I could intercept, a digital confession that would make the rest of it unnecessary. But the screen stayed dark, stubbornly blank, as if it had already moved on. I ran hot water over the plates, scalded my hands raw, but the tremor in my chest refused to settle. For most of my life, the act of cleaning had been a form of control. If you could impose order on the mess, the world might just hold together for another day. But not now. Every dish I dried seemed to add to the weight instead of lightening it. So I did what men like me are trained to do. I kept a record. First, I sat at my desk in the den, the same desk where I once signed birthday cards and paid bills, and opened a fresh legal pad. I wrote down the exact time and date of the message, the sender's initial, the content word for word. I recorded where the phone was, what we were eating, the position of the hands on the stove clock. I logged my own reaction in the driest possible language, like I was writing a maintenance report on a busted generator. Heart rate elevated, fine motor tremor observed, no evidence of confrontation. Then I started photographing things, the joint checking statements that Evelyn always left half open on the kitchen counter, the envelope from the life insurance company addressed to both of us, the deed to the house, tucked in the back of the file cabinet under important. I scanned the warranty on the roof, the receipts from Sarah's orthodontist, the car titles. I backed everything up to a cloud drive I named Disclosures, all caps, because the world only takes you seriously if you speak like a prosecutor. Every piece of evidence was a small act of self-preservation, a shield against the coming arguments, the inevitable attempts to rearrange the facts. I knew how these things went. Every man at the plant had a story of an ex who claimed she'd paid for the house, or a kid who suddenly remembered a childhood of abuse when the time came to split assets. Memory was a slippery thing. It bent toward the person with the loudest voice or the best lawyer. I wasn't about to let my years disappear into the fog of someone else's narrative. But even as I assembled my paper fortress, I knew it was pointless. No judge was going to award me a medal for time served. No mediator would calculate the hours I'd spent patching the walls or balancing the checkbook. The only victory was in holding the truth in my own hands, for as long as it took before even I couldn't remember what was real. I printed out the photos and stacked them in a manila folder, the kind that always reminded me of hospital charts. I labeled it Disclosures, then slid it into the bottom drawer of the desk. The drawer stuck, as it always did, and I had to jiggle it just so to get it closed. I stared at the handle for a long time, wondering if it would be worth fixing, or if I should just let it jam shut forever. By the time the sun set, I had nothing left to document. The house was cleaner than it had ever been, the files in perfect order. I felt nothing, no anger, no relief, not even the satisfaction of a job well done. Only a kind of blankness, a numbness that made me think of the old power plant after they shut down the turbines for good. The silence was absolute, oppressive. No hum, no flicker, just the cold certainty that nobody would ever need me again. That night, I lay awake and pictured Evelyn in whatever hotel room she'd booked, her phone buzzing with new instructions, her hands already making lists for a future I'd have no part in. I thought of Sarah, wherever she was, probably working late or trying to find a ride home, completely unaware that the ground under her had shifted. I wondered if, when the time came, she would take my side, or if she would simply split the difference, like everyone else did. The truth was, I didn't care. I only wanted the record. I only wanted, for once, to be able to point to something, anything, and say, this is what happened. This is how things broke. In the morning, I found the folder waiting where I'd left it, thick with the evidence of my own obsolescence. I carried it to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, and sat there until the sky turned gray. Nobody called. Nobody needed anything fixed. I sipped my coffee, flipped open the folder, and read the first page aloud, just to hear it said. I wrote it all down because I knew, sooner or later, memory is the first thing people edit when the truth is too hard to bear. Wednesday morning, 9:15 sharp, I parked outside the gray office complex where Farah Iqbal practiced law. The building looked like every medical annex and bankruptcy court on the east side. Modular, windowless, built for triage and exit. I sat in the truck for 5 minutes, rehearsing what I'd say, then walked the long hallway past closed doors, past the humming soda machine to Suite 103. The waiting room was empty except for a ficus plant, wilting in its plastic urn. I checked in at the counter, gave my name and appointment, and the receptionist, young, sharp voice, the kind that could cut glass, told me to wait. I did. I thumbed the edge of the disclosures folder, the paper already soft from handling. Every so often, I'd catch the eye of my own reflection in the glass door, looking older and less certain than I felt even 2 days before. Farah called me back herself, exactly on time. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with a neat braid and a suit that looked expensive, though not brand new. She shook my hand, strong grip, brisk, and led me into her office. No windows here either, just a desk, 2 chairs, a shelf of color-coded binders, and a lamp the color of bone. She started with my name, address, date of birth, then let me talk. I told her what happened. I kept it factual, the way I had in the folder. The message, the timeline, the lack of prior warnings. Farah asked for the documentation, flipped through it at a speed that told me she'd seen 100 just like it. She paused only once at the text from Evelyn's phone. She raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. After 15 minutes, she closed the folder and set it aside. "We'll keep this clean," she said. "First things first. I file a notice of separate counsel today. That means she can't make legal moves without copying me." She clicked her mouse, brought up a template, began to fill in the blanks. "Next, we do mutual financial disclosures. 90 days of statements, all accounts, including retirement, insurance, brokerage, anything with both names or either. We want to know if she's moved assets, transferred funds, opened lines of credit." She paused, met my eye. "Do you know of any big recent transfers?" I shook my head. "Nothing I noticed. We use joint checking for the bills, and she's got her own credit card, but it's always paid down." "We'll confirm that." She typed for another minute, then turned the screen toward me. "Standard standstill order. This prevents either party from making large withdrawals, changing beneficiaries, taking on new debt, or using third-party finance apps to reroute money. You'll both be served copies. Your wife will be barred from making any unusual transactions until the court says otherwise." I nodded, surprised at the matter-of-factness, the procedural inevitability of it all. "Insurance and brokerage," she continued, "require a flagged note on file. All edits, withdrawals, or beneficiary changes must be done in person, with both parties present or with explicit notarized consent. I'll fax the hold to both places. That way, there's a trail, and nothing gets missed in the shuffle." She stood, opened a cabinet, and handed me a stack of forms. "Sign here and here. This authorizes me to access the accounts and request records. It also lets me negotiate with opposing counsel if she hires one." Her efficiency was almost soothing, a metronome ticking in an otherwise empty room. I signed where she pointed, felt the pen drag along the ridges in my fingerprint. When she was finished, she sat back, folded her hands, and let out a breath. "This isn't your fault, Mr. Field," she said, her tone softening by a degree. "You're not the first person to come in with a folder and a shock to the system. The world doesn't reward careful people the way it should." I shrugged, unsure if I wanted comfort or just the facts. "Here's my advice," she said. "Move slow. Speak plain. Let the paper carry the heavy thing, at least until you're ready to set it down. If she calls, you can tell her you have counsel and can't talk details. Don't let anyone else, daughter, neighbors, friends, pull you into side conversations. All communication goes through me until further notice. Understood?" "Understood," I said, though I wondered if I'd ever understand any of it. She nodded, scribbled her direct line on a card, and handed it over. If anything else happens, calls, texts, unexpected visits, you document. Time, place, what was said. If you need to talk, call me. That's what you pay for. I stood ready to go. She walked me to the door, stopping short of the hallway. The law is slow, she said, but it's fair if you give it time. You did the right thing coming in. I thanked her, shook her hand again, and stepped back into the waiting room. The ficus looked no healthier than before. I walked the length of the building, out past the humming machines, past the parking lot full of cars with their own stories of betrayal and maintenance and quiet failure. In the cab of the truck, I sat for a moment, the folder on my lap, the papers signed and stamped. I felt the tiniest uptick of relief, the sense that at least now there was a process, a machine built to keep things from getting any worse. But the truth was, the machine didn't care about me, or about Evelyn, or about the life we'd built and watched corrode from the inside. It was only a system, grinding forward, eating up the evidence, issuing verdicts, and moving on to the next disaster. I drove home, listening to the tires hum on the road, thinking about Farah's advice. Let paper carry the heavy thing. I wondered if that was really possible, or if, like everything else in my life, I'd end up carrying it alone. By Friday, the game of waiting was over. I got the text at 11:02 a.m., just as I was tightening the chain on the back gate. Let's talk, Warren. Home after 3. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard, before replying, kitchen is fine. I meant it as a neutral ground, but the room already felt poisoned by what had happened there. Steam from the roast, the clatter of the peeler, the phone's silent confession. I spent the next 3 hours assembling my arsenal, not out of malice, but from a need to impose structure on the chaos. I set my phone to voice memo, slipped it under a napkin holder. On the table, I arranged 3 stacks of paper, security confirmations from the bank, flagged notices from the brokerage and insurer, the initial round of disclosure requests from Farah. Each was clipped, labeled, and cross-referenced with a post-it in my blocky handwriting. I laid out a notepad and 2 pens, one blue, one black, in case signatures were needed. I kept the blinds halfway open. The afternoon light cut a hard line across the laminate tabletop, the same one we'd eaten at for decades. I sat at the far end, in the chair with the least wobble, and waited. Evelyn arrived 10 minutes late. She was dressed for business, not comfort. Slacks, a crisp white blouse, her hair pulled back with the clip Sarah bought her last Mother's Day. She hung her purse on the back of the chair, then took a moment to scan the table, cataloging the paperwork, the careful choreography of the setup. She sat opposite me, folding her hands on the formica with the same calm she used when balancing a checkbook. "Did you get my text?" she said, as if we hadn't spoken in months. Her voice was soft, measured, the way you'd talk to a nervous pet. "I did," I said. I watched her eyes, no sign of anger, but a deep exhaustion, as if she'd already lived this scene a dozen times in her head and was just waiting for me to get it over with. She glanced at the phone under the napkin holder. "Recording?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded, no judgment in it. "That's fine." For a moment, neither of us moved. The refrigerator kicked on, a low rumble that seemed to fill every inch of space. "I'm going to read through the standstill order," I said. "Farah recommends we do it point by point. We can make notes or ask questions after." "Farah?" Evelyn repeated, lips pressed tight. "She's efficient, I'll give her that." I ignored the bait, picked up the first page. Effective immediately. No unusual withdrawals from any account, including joint checking and savings. No changes to beneficiaries on any policy, no new debt, and no finance apps or transfers outside standard bill pay. Both parties will have access to all statements, and all moves above $500 require written consent. I paused, let the words settle. Evelyn didn't blink. Disclosures, I continued. We each provide 90 days of bank, credit, brokerage, and insurance records. Nothing withheld. Everything cataloged, with notes if you need context. I slid the disclosure request across the table. She took it, flipping through the pages with the same efficiency Farah had shown me. I moved to the next stack. Insurer and brokerage have a flag on file. All edits must be done in person, with me or my representative present, or with notarized consent. No changes until the disclosures are complete, and we've agreed on terms. Agreed on terms, Evelyn echoed, a bitter twist at the corner of her mouth. I set down the packet, waited for her to speak. She did, after a long, slow breath. You really think I'm trying to steal something from you? I think the law is there for a reason, I said. This way, nobody gets hurt any more than they have to. Evelyn's fingers drummed the table. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but instead, she straightened her spine and looked me dead in the eye. I don't want to fight, she said. We can keep this soft. No ugly scenes, no lawyer wars. It doesn't have to be like those stories you hear. Soft, I repeated. The word landed wrong, like a stone in a glass of water. Yes, she said. Soft, gentle. We owe Sarah that, at least. I reached for the manila folder on the chair beside me, labeled in black Sharpie, Disclosures. I laid it on the table, the thud of it more final than any words. Soft is clear, I said. Soft is paper. We keep everything on the record, and nothing gets lost or twisted later. Evelyn looked at the folder for a long time. She touched the edge, ran her thumb along the tab, then slid it back toward me. Fine, she said. We'll do it your way. I felt the faintest tremor of relief, the way you do when a storm finally breaks and you realize you're still standing. But there was no triumph in it, no real victory. Just the beginning of another process, another series of steps and counter-steps, each more draining than the last. Evelyn stood, purse already in hand. I'll send my records to Farah Monday. Tell her not to bother with a process server. She won't, I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. For a moment, Evelyn lingered at the doorway, her silhouette sharp against the fading afternoon. She looked back just once and said, "This was never about money, Warren. You know that, don't you?" I nodded, but I didn't answer. After she left, I stayed at the table, replaying every word, every movement, the way you replay an accident in slow motion, looking for the missed sign that could have changed the outcome. I stopped the recording, backed it up to the cloud, then filed the papers in the cabinet Farah told me to keep locked at all times. I poured myself a glass of water, drank it slow, and waited for the heaviness in my chest to ease. It never did. Soft is paper, I thought. Soft is clear, and sometimes, soft is just another word for empty. Monday morning, the packet arrived by overnight mail. A manila envelope, thick and faintly oily, addressed in Evelyn's careful script. For a moment, I just looked at it, weighing its heft in my palm, the way you might weigh a live grenade. I peeled the seal slowly, feeling the glue give, and pulled the stack of papers free. I started with the basics: pay stubs, checking statements, the cable bill. Each page was cross-referenced, as if she wanted to make my audit as easy as possible. For the first 20 minutes, I found nothing. No irregularities, no red flags, just the steady pulse of normal life, rendered in black and white. I started to think maybe I'd imagined the worst. Maybe we were just another couple splitting the difference and going our separate ways. Then I hit the line item. New account. American Express. Opened 3 weeks ago. Charges. $1,250 to an airline. $960 to a downtown hotel. $550 at a restaurant I'd never heard of. The billing address was still our house, but the secondary contact was an unfamiliar email. I wrote it down, letter by letter, underlining the domain twice. Next came the transfers. 3 Zelle payments, $2,000, $2,500, $1,400 to an account labeled M. Reeves. No notation, no context, just the digital trail, clean and silent. The sums were round, deliberate, as if someone had calculated exactly how much to move without tripping the bank's alarms. I felt my pulse in my teeth. I set the papers down, breathed through my nose, then called Farah. She picked up on the second ring. "I've got it," I said. "The packet." She was silent for a beat. Then, "Anything stand out?" I read her the numbers, the dates, the names. I heard her typing, the quick staccato of fingers trained to keep up with disaster. She asked for the email, the account numbers, the exact amounts. I gave her everything, and she repeated it back to me, never missing a digit. "We'll prepare a return or credit memo," she said. "Anything taken out before the order can either be returned or credited in settlement. I'll add it to the mediation binder." She let out a sigh, barely audible. "I'm sorry, Warren." Some people just can't help themselves. I didn't know if she meant Evelyn or me, but it didn't matter. The work was the same. She asked for the scanned copies. I sent them from the kitchen, watching the files upload, the progress bar inching forward with the speed of melting ice. When I finished, I poured myself coffee and stared out the window at the dead lawn, the color of cardboard, the trees bare and indifferent. By noon, Farah emailed back the memo. Every transaction highlighted, annotated, cross-referenced with the standstill order. She'd already drafted 2 new clauses: a no-contact rule, barring third parties from financial decisions or visits to the house without prior consent, and a temporary occupancy schedule to keep us from sharing a roof at the same time. She called them protective measures. I called them common sense. In the afternoon, the mediator's office sent a calendar invite. I clicked accept without thinking. The date blinked at me from the screen. 3 weeks away. Long enough for the lawyers to build their fortresses, but not long enough to feel like real time. I spent the rest of the day cross-checking Evelyn's disclosures with my own. Every anomaly I circled, every discrepancy I logged. It was slow work, not unlike patching drywall. Scrape, measure, smooth, repeat. I lost track of the hours, and when the sun went down, I made myself a sandwich and ate it over the sink, too tired to bother with a plate. After dinner, I opened the binder Farah had prepared. The evidence was all there. The Zelle transfers, the Amex statement, the brokerage sweep. I ran my finger down the page line by line until the numbers started to blur together. I should have been angry, or at least surprised. But mostly I felt what I'd always felt, tired and a little empty, like the numbers were just numbers, the money already gone before I'd had a chance to notice. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the stacks of paper, the folders and the binders, each one a small monument to the things we'd built and watched decay. I wondered if Evelyn was sitting at her own table, going through the motions, or if she'd already moved on to whatever came next. I thought of Sarah, and how I'd explain all of it to her, how the end had been so methodical, so quiet. You might not notice until the house was already empty. I wrote her a note, just a line or two, telling her that I loved her and that none of this was her fault. Then I put the note in a drawer, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The work would still be there in the morning. The mediator's office was a converted bungalow with a porch swing and fading wind chimes. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon and photocopier toner. The mediator herself wore ink-blue glasses and a slate-gray dress, her hair pinned with the kind of precision you see in laboratory technicians. She introduced herself as Miss Denham, then ushered me and Evelyn into a room with a small round table, 3 chairs, and a box of tissues at the center. Miss Denham spoke softly, as if the words themselves might break under pressure. Our goal is transparency, fairness, and above all, safety for both parties. There's no judgment here, only process. She outlined the ground rules. No raised voices, no accusations, every statement written down. If we disagreed, we said so. If we needed a break, we took it. Her pen hovered over a legal pad, poised to transcribe every word. Evelyn sat to my right, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the edge of the table. I caught her glance once or twice, but mostly, she kept her gaze low. She didn't speak until asked, and when she did, her voice was so quiet it barely reached me. Ms. Denham started with the numbers. She read off the balances, the assets, the debts, each line a small incision. When she mentioned the Zelle transfers, Evelyn nodded but did not explain. When she mentioned the Amex account, Evelyn confirmed it was hers, said she'd already canceled the card. The reimbursement from the brokerage account drew no comment. "Mr. Field," the mediator asked, "is your preference to return the funds or to treat them as advances against the final settlement?" I hesitated, then said, "I want everything on the record. If it's easier to return the money, we do that. If not, we treat it as a credit and move on." Ms. Denham nodded, made a note, and moved to the next point. We went through the rest of the disclosures line by line. Evelyn had nothing to hide, or at least nothing she hadn't already prepared to reveal. The process was methodical, antiseptic, the way you might inventory an estate for auction. The conversation turned to Sarah. "Will you need a third party to facilitate family contact?" Ms. Denham asked. Evelyn looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of pain, quickly suppressed. "We can handle that ourselves," Evelyn said. "We're adults." I nodded, but Ms. Denham wrote down, "Therapist available on request." The house, the cars, the pension, everything was scheduled for independent appraisal, with results to be shared before the next meeting. All logins to shared accounts would be reset in person, at the bank, with both signatures on file. No asset transfers above $500, unless both parties signed off in blue ink. When it was done, Ms. Denham recapped the session in a monotone, as if reading the minutes of a particularly dull city council meeting. "Anything else to discuss before we close?" she asked. Evelyn shook her head. I didn't trust myself to speak. We signed the interim agreement, 3 copies each, one for every interested party and one for the mediator's file. Ms. Denham escorted us out, her footsteps silent on the carpet. Evelyn walked ahead, not looking back. I followed, unsure if I wanted to catch up or to lag behind. The mediator's door clicked shut, and suddenly the only sound was the wind chimes, clattering in the November breeze. I got in my truck, the seat still warm from the morning sun, and sat there for a long time, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. No voices were raised, only pens scratching against paper, writing the final chapters of something that once felt indestructible. 2 weeks after the mediation, the reconciliation packet arrived. This time it came certified, signature required, as if the legal system itself doubted I would accept delivery. I signed at the door, tore the tape, and read the summary sheet while standing in the foyer. The brokerage account had been restored. The $8,000 reimbursement returned. with a single-line apology from Evelyn's lawyer. The 3 Zelle transfers, totaling $5,900, were now logged as non-marital debts, to be repaid from her separate account. The Amex card was closed with a zero balance, the final statement attached for my records. Every item was annotated, referenced, and initialed, proof that someone somewhere was keeping track. The bank called me the next day. Not a robocall, but a real person, a manager named Jerry, who said she was my case contact for all future matters. She asked if I wanted to set a new password for the joint accounts, and when I said yes, she read me the protocol. No online changes, no requests by phone. Everything had to be done in person, with 2 forms of ID and a signature on file. It felt both safe and humiliating, as if the world was now so dangerous I couldn't be trusted with my own life. I went in the next morning, waited in line behind a man cashing a disability check, and when it was my turn, Jerry walked me through the process. She was professional, efficient, and never once looked me in the eye. She gave me a laminated card with my new access code, told me to keep it in a secure place, and wished me luck. The insurer sent an email. Beneficiary unchanged. All edits require in-branch notarization. The brokerage flagged the account, no changes without both parties present. Every system was locked down, fortified against fraud or error or sudden betrayal. I gathered the orders, the paperwork, the annotated statements, and filed them in a new safe I'd bought at the hardware store. I taped a copy of the standstill order to the inside of the safe door, a silent contract between me and whatever remained of my dignity. I never used to think about safes or passwords or the way a house can turn against you in a heartbeat. But now, every time I opened the safe, or double-checked the lock on the garage, or watched the porch light flicker on at dusk, I felt a strange comfort, a sense that the world might take everything from me, but at least it would have to work for it. I missed the old life, but only in theory. The rest was habit, muscle memory, a daily checklist of what still needed repair. Some nights I lay awake and imagined the safe as a kind of heart, battered, locked, full of things too precious or dangerous to leave unguarded. In the darkness, I listened for the click of the tumblers and let the silence do its work. Forgot things sometimes, but I refused to let whispers rob me of the life I earned, and I won't allow the word soft to erase what's fair in this painful reality I must now face. I started the letter on a Tuesday, not because I believed in fate or symmetry, but because Sarah was working from home, and I could be certain she'd get the mail before the weekend. I kept it short, knowing she'd already pieced most of it together from texts and clipped conversations. I wanted to spare her the details, but I wanted her to know the truth, the honest, unvarnished version, the kind nobody writes in Hallmark cards or puts in family emails. I wrote, "Sarah, I don't know what you've heard, and I don't expect you to take sides. Just know that none of this is your fault. People change, even when they promise not to. Your mother and I are handling things the best we can, and I want you to remember the good years, not the mess that came after. If you ever have questions or just want the story as I saw it, you know where to find me. Love, Dad." I put the letter in a plain envelope and mailed it from the hardware store where nobody would see me hesitate at the slot. The rest of the week passed in slow increments. I kept busy, replaced the basement sump pump, cleaned the gutters, raked leaves from the backyard. I boxed up Evelyn's old dishes and left them by the door, not knowing if she'd come to collect them or send someone else. Each morning, I opened the safe, checked the folders, and updated a running log Farah told me to keep. It felt excessive, but it gave the day a purpose. Once I caught myself setting 2 plates at the table, a habit I'd never noticed until it was pointless. I put the extra one back and ate in silence, the sound of the fork on the plate louder than I'd ever realized. Sarah called on Friday, after work. I heard the nerves in her voice, the pauses, the way she waited for me to fill in the blanks. She didn't ask for explanations, only if I was okay, and if I needed anything. "I'm fine," I said, which wasn't a lie, but wasn't the whole truth either. "I'm getting things in order. Maybe one day I'll have you over for real food again." "I'd like that," she said, and I could hear her smiling. We didn't talk long. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the empty spot across from me. I tried to imagine who would sit there next, or if I'd get used to eating alone. Maybe, I thought, it was better this way. The work was simpler, the repairs more straightforward. There were no mysteries left in the house, only things to be fixed or thrown out. On Sunday, I bought a pie at the grocery store, the kind Evelyn used to bake from scratch. I ate a slice, then wrapped the rest in foil and left it on the back porch, just in case she decided to stop by. I sat outside for a while, feeling the cold settle in my bones, and watched the sun go down behind the fence line. The world had not ended. It had only changed, in the way everything does, slow at first, then all at once. Later, before bed, I opened the safe one last time. I looked at the folders, the log, the standstill order taped to the door. I touched the pen I kept clipped to the file, felt its weight, and knew that whatever came next would be written in my own hand. I still forgot things sometimes, but I never again mistook the quiet for safety, or the soft for something that would not cut. Please subscribe and like the video to share more stories like this.